Ethan Caldwell used to believe that love was measured in consistency. Morning coffee brewed the same way, a steady hand at the small of his wife's back, rent paid on time, promises kept without applause. He had married Harper Lane at 27 because she made the world feel intentional. Harper laughed with her whole body, trusted easily, and believed in futures that stretched beyond their modest apartment in Portland. For 5 years, Ethan built his identity around being the kind of man who never strayed. Harper had once told him that what she loved most was how safe he felt. That word, safe, became his quiet obsession. He worked late at the architecture firm, not because he was chasing ambition, but because he wanted Harper to have options. He wanted to be solid ground. And for a long time, the trouble didn't begin with anger or boredom. It began with silence. Harper had started a new job at a marketing agency downtown, and the hours were unpredictable. She came home animated but distracted, speaking in half-finished stories about campaigns and clients. Ethan listened, but somewhere between her sentences, something subtle shifted. Her phone lit up more often. She smiled at texts she didn't explain. Ethan told himself he was imagining it. Love, after all, required trust. Then came Lila Morgan. Lila wasn't supposed to matter. She was a freelance interior consultant hired by Ethan's firm to collaborate on a boutique hotel renovation. She walked into the conference room with calm confidence and a habit of holding eye contact just a second longer than necessary. Ethan noticed the way she listened, intently, as though every word held weight. It had been years since anyone looked at him like that. At first, their conversations were strictly professional. Layouts, textures, deadlines. But in the quiet moments after meetings, Lila would ask about his design philosophy, his ambitions, what inspired him. Ethan found himself answering honestly, not as a husband or provider, but as a man who once had restless dreams that he told himself it was harmless. Harper was busy. He was busy. Adults were allowed friendships, but emotional boundaries erode before physical ones do. The night everything tilted, Harper canceled dinner. Client emergency, she had said, barely meeting his eyes. Ethan reheated leftovers and ate alone. The apartment felt smaller than usual. Restless, he opened his laptop to review blueprints, but found an email from Lila instead. She had attached revised sketches and added a simple line at the end. "You looked exhausted today. Don't forget you're allowed to breathe. That IT shouldn't have meant anything." "Yet it did," he replied. That exchange turned into late-night conversations about work, then about childhood, then about regrets. Lila spoke about a failed engagement and how betrayal had carved something sharp inside her. Ethan listened carefully, unaware that he was stepping into territory he had once condemned in others. Weeks passed. Harper grew distant in ways that were difficult to name. She guarded her phone, showered immediately after coming home, and deflected simple questions. Ethan's suspicions coiled quietly in his chest, but he said nothing. Confrontation felt dangerous. Denial felt easier. One Friday evening, Lila suggested they celebrate a milestone in the hotel project. "Just one drink," she said. "You deserve it." Ethan hesitated before agreeing. He told Harper he'd be late at the office. The lie tasted foreign, metallic. The bar was dim and intimate. Lila spoke softly, her voice wrapping around him. She asked if he was happy. The question lingered between them like a dare. "I used to be," he admitted. The confession startled him. It was the first crack in the version of himself he had carefully maintained. Lila reached across the table, her fingers brushing his wrist, not boldly, just enough to register warmth. "You're allowed to want more than survival," she said. That night, Ethan returned home to find Harper asleep, her phone buzzing faintly on the nightstand. A name flashed across the screen: Caleb. The message preview was brief, but intimate enough to hollow him out. He stood there longer than necessary, staring at the evidence he hadn't wanted. The realization struck not as rage, but as confirmation. Something had been breaking long before he noticed. In the days that followed, Ethan didn't confront her. Instead, he withdrew. If Harper could cultivate secrets, so could he. The logic was flawed, but pain rarely reasons well. Lila became his refuge. She listened without judgment when he admitted he felt invisible in his own marriage. She didn't ask him to leave Harper. She didn't push. She simply remained available, attentive, present in ways that Harper no longer seemed to be. The emotional affair deepened quietly. Texts became calls. Calls became shared confessions. Ethan told himself he wasn't betraying Harper because he hadn't crossed a physical line. Yet every time he deleted a message, he knew the truth. The turning point came on a rain-soaked evening when Lila invited him to see the finished hotel suite. "It's empty," she said. "We can finally see it without noise." The room was elegant and warm, their months of collaboration distilled into polished wood and soft lighting. Ethan walked through the space, feeling a strange pride. Lila stood close beside him, closer than before. "You deserve to feel chosen," she whispered. The words unraveled something inside him. Ethan thought of Harper's guarded smiles, of Caleb's name glowing in the dark. He thought of the version of himself who had once sworn he would never be the kind of man who justified betrayal. And then he made a choice. Not impulsively, not drunkenly, but deliberately. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be vulnerable with someone who wasn't his wife. The intimacy that followed wasn't driven by lust alone. It was fueled by resentment, loneliness, and the dangerous comfort of being understood. Later, lying awake in the quiet suite, Ethan stared at the ceiling and felt neither triumph nor relief. Instead, he felt the weight of consequence settling in a place that he had crossed a line he once believed was sacred. And somewhere across the city, Harper's phone was probably lighting up again. Ethan realized, with a clarity that chilled him, that whatever game of secrets they were both playing was no longer about survival. It was about who would break first. The silence in the kitchen felt heavier than the rain outside. Ethan Caldwell stood near the counter, the phone still in his hand, while Ava Bennett leaned against the opposite side of the room as if distance could soften the moment. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Ethan finally set the phone down on the table. The screen dimmed, but the message remained burned in his mind. "That wasn't meant for me," he said slowly. Ava rubbed her temples, exhaling as if she had been holding her breath all day. "I already told you it's nothing." Ethan watched her carefully. In 2 years together, he had learned to recognize when she was nervous. She avoided eye contact and spoke with a forced calmness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't accidentally send something like that," Ethan replied. Ava didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the sink and turned on the faucet, rinsing her hands even though they weren't dirty. It gave her a reason not to face him. Ethan felt frustration rising inside his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Who were you texting?" he asked. Ava shut off the water and grabbed a towel. "A friend." "What friend?" She hesitated just long enough for the answer to feel incomplete. "Just someone from work," she said. Ethan frowned slightly. "You're a freelance photographer. Since when do you text clients like that?" Ava's shoulders stiffened. "That message was taken out of context," she said quietly. Ethan let out a breath that sounded more like disbelief than relief. "Okay," he said. "Then give me the context." The room grew quiet again. Ava placed the towel on the counter and looked at the floor. For the first time since she walked in, she seemed unsure of what to say next. Ethan had always admired her confidence. Ava was the type of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. She was bold, creative, and rarely afraid of difficult conversations. But now she looked cornered. "That text wasn't what you think," she said eventually. Ethan folded his arms. "Then tell me what I think." Ava shook her head slightly. "You're overreacting." The words landed badly. Ethan felt his patience begin to slip. "I'm overreacting," he repeated. "You sent a message that clearly wasn't meant for me. And somehow I'm the one making it a problem?" Ava finally looked at him directly. Her expression was complicated, part guilt, part frustration. "I didn't mean for you to see it," she said. That sentence hung in the air like a confession. Ethan blinked slowly. "That's not exactly reassuring." Ava walked past him into the living room, pacing slowly, as if she needed movement to think clearly. Ethan followed a few steps behind, refusing to let the conversation dissolve in his silence. "Is there someone else?" he asked. Ava stopped walking. Her back was turned to him, but the pause answered more than words could. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. "Ava," he said quietly. She turned around, her expression tense. "It's complicated." Ethan almost laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "It shouldn't be." Another silence filled the room. Rain continued tapping against the windows, steady and relentless. "How long?" Ethan asked. Ava's eyes widened slightly. "What? How long has this been going on?" She hesitated again, and that hesitation hurt more than the message itself. "It's not what you think," she repeated. Ethan shook his head slowly. "You keep saying that, but you're not actually explaining anything." Ava crossed her arms defensively. "It's just someone I've been talking to." "Talking?" Ethan echoed. "Yes." "And the message?" Ava looked away again. Ethan suddenly realized something unsettling. The issue wasn't just the message. It was the fact that Ava seemed more focused on minimizing the situation than being honest about it. Who is he? Ethan asked. The question lingered between them. Ava hesitated one more time before answering. Lucas. The name meant nothing to Ethan. Lucas who? Lucas Turner. Ethan searched his memory but couldn't place the name anywhere in Ava's stories about work or friends. Where did you meet him? Ava ran a hand through her hair. At a gallery event a few months ago. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. A few months? Ava nodded slightly. He's an art consultant. We started talking about photography and projects. It just kind of continued from there. And you never thought to mention him? It wasn't serious, she said quickly. Ethan stared at her. Then why hide it? Ava didn't answer. The apartment felt smaller now, the walls closing in around the conversation. Ethan walked toward the window, looking out at the rain-soaked streets below. His thoughts were moving quickly, trying to piece together fragments of the past few months. Late nights editing photos, unexpected shoots, moments when Ava seemed distracted, details he had ignored. Behind him, Ava spoke again. It didn't mean anything. Ethan turned back toward her slowly. Then why does it feel like it does? Ava's expression softened slightly, but the tension remained. I didn't plan for it, she said quietly. Ethan studied her face, searching for the person he thought he knew. Are you still talking to him? Ava didn't respond right away. That pause was answer enough. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing the reality settling in around him. Trust had cracked earlier that evening. Now it felt like the fracture was spreading deeper. Outside, the rain had begun to slow, leaving the city glistening under streetlights. Inside the apartment, Ethan realized something that unsettled him even more than the message itself. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, and the truth about Lucas Turner was clearly far from finished, revealing itself. Ethan Caldwell had always believed he was an honest man. He'd built his life on routine, discipline, and the quiet pride of being dependable. At 29, he worked as a junior architect in Chicago, designing clean lines and open spaces for people who wanted clarity in their homes, perhaps because he struggled to find it in his own heart. He was thoughtful, reserved, and the kind of man who chose his words carefully, as if every sentence were a beam that had to support weight. Madeline Harper entered his life first. They met at a mutual friend's small rooftop gathering on a late spring evening. Madeline laughed easily, the sound bright and unguarded, and she listened with the sort of attention that made Ethan feel visible. She was a literature teacher, passionate about poetry, forever quoting lines about love and fate. Within weeks, she became the calm rhythm of his days. She remembered the details, how he preferred his coffee, the way he grew quiet when something troubled him, the faint scar on his wrist from childhood. Madeline loved him in a steady, patient way. She never rushed him, never demanded dramatic gestures. She believed love was built through presence, not promises. For a while, Ethan believed that too. But certainty has a fragile spine. 6 months into their relationship, Ethan began collaborating on a community center project with a marketing consultant named Chloe Bennett. Chloe was everything Madeline was not. Sharp, ambitious, magnetic in a room full of people. She challenged Ethan openly, questioned his ideas, and teased him about his seriousness. Where Madeline offered comfort, Chloe offered intensity. Tea first, Ethan told himself it was nothing more than professional chemistry. Chloe stayed late at the office often, reviewing plans, drafting campaign concepts, leaning over his desk with an ease that unsettled him. She spoke about risk as if it were oxygen. She admired his talent openly, praising his designs in a way that felt intoxicating. Ethan hadn't realized how deeply he craved admiration until Chloe gave it to him without restraint. Madeline noticed a shift before Ethan did. He checked his phone more frequently. He canceled 2 dinner plans in a single month, blaming deadlines. His eyes seemed distracted even when he was physically present. Madeline asked once, gently, if everything was all right. Work's just demanding lately, he replied, offering a reassuring smile that did not quite reach his eyes. IT wasn't entirely a lie. The truth was more complicated. Ethan felt divided, not between 2 women, but between 2 versions of himself. With Madeline, he was grounded, steady, dependable. With Chloe, he felt bold, seen, alive in a way that frightened him. The first real crack formed on a rainy Thursday evening. The office had emptied early because of the storm. Chloe and Ethan were alone, reviewing final presentation slides. The thunder outside felt theatrical, almost deliberate. When the power flickered briefly, Chloe laughed and said, "Looks like we're trapped here together." It was a harmless comment, It should have remained harmless. Instead, silence stretched between them. Ethan felt the weight of proximity, the unspoken awareness that something unacknowledged hovered in the air. Chloe stepped closer, her tone softer now. "Do you ever feel," she asked, "like you're living the safe version of your life?" The question struck him harder than it should have. He thought of Madeline's careful love, their planned weekends, the quiet certainty of their future. Safe, predictable, stable. And yet, here he was, pulse quickening at the idea of something uncertain. "I don't know," he answered honestly. Chloe studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "You deserve more than safe," she said. That night, nothing happened beyond a lingering look and attention neither of them addressed directly. But something had shifted irreversibly. Ethan went home to Madeline's apartment. She had left a note on the kitchen counter. "Dinner's in the fridge. Don't work too late. I miss you." He stood there for a long time, staring at her handwriting. Guilt rose like heat in his chest. He told himself he would set boundaries with Chloe. He told himself admiration was not the same as love. He told himself temptation was normal, manageable. But he did not tell Chloe to step back. Instead, the late nights continued. The conversations grew more personal. Chloe shared stories about past relationships that bored her, about men who were intimidated by her ambition. She made Ethan feel chosen. Madeline, meanwhile, planned a weekend getaway for their anniversary. She spoke about the future as something solid and shared. She trusted him fully, a trust so complete it almost felt sacred. The night before the trip, Ethan received a message from Chloe. "I can't stop thinking about you. Tell me I'm not crazy." He stared at the screen, heart pounding. He could have ignored it. He could have responded with distance, with clarity, with loyalty. Instead, he typed back, "You're not crazy." The words were simple, but they marked a decision. By the time he lay beside Madeline, who slept peacefully with her head resting against his shoulder, Ethan knew he had crossed an invisible line. Not physically, yet, but emotionally. Undeniably, he had invited something into his life that would demand a cost. As he watched the ceiling in the darkness, listening to the steady rhythm of Madeline's breathing, he understood that love was no longer simple. It had become a test of character, and he was no longer certain he would pass. The apartment felt heavier than ever when Olivia Carter returned that evening. The shadows of the dimly lit living room seemed longer, stretching across the floor like reminders of the choices she had made. She set her keys down slowly, aware of the tension that clung to her chest. Ethan Walker was there, sitting on the couch with his laptop open, but the usual polite detachment seemed sharper tonight, almost accusing. Olivia felt a pang of guilt twist inside her, a quiet yet persistent ache she could no longer ignore. Ethan glanced up, offering a strained smile. "You're home late," he said, his tone casual, yet it carried a subtle weight, as though he sensed something unspoken. Olivia's fingers trembled slightly as she closed the door behind her. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, moving to pour herself a glass of water, the liquid trembling slightly in the cup. She realized with sudden clarity that the distance between them was no longer just emotional. It had begun to feel physical, like an invisible barrier she could not cross. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Logan blinked on the screen. "I've been thinking about you all day." Olivia stared at the words, feeling the familiar rush of warmth and longing, and simultaneously a stabbing guilt. She knew that her connection with Logan was no longer innocent. The emotional affair had already begun to carve a path through the life she had built. She put the phone down quickly, trying to steady her racing thoughts, but the pull of desire lingered, insistent and unforgiving. Ethan closed his laptop and leaned back, stretching. "Olivia, are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer this time, tinged with concern. She looked at him, at the man she had once loved so completely, and her heart constricted. There had been years of laughter, tenderness, and shared dreams, but they now seemed like echoes from another life. She wanted to tell him the truth, to reveal the storm of emotions that had taken root in her, but fear held her back. the fear of shattering the fragile remnants of their relationship, of facing judgment, of losing the comfort of familiarity. Instead, she forced a small smile. "I'm fine," she murmured, though the words fell hollow even as she spoke them. Ethan nodded, apparently accepting her answer, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Silence settled over the room, heavy and suffocating, and Olivia felt the weight of her choices pressing down. She thought of Logan, his presence, his attention, the intensity of his gaze, and she understood that her life was no longer balanced between the safety of familiarity and the thrill of desire. The scales had already tipped. Later that night, Olivia found herself standing by the window, staring at the city lights reflected in the rain-slick streets below. Her mind replayed the evenings with Logan, each laugh, each lingering glance, each moment that had chipped away at her resolve. She wondered if she had crossed a line from which there was no return. The excitement that had once felt exhilarating now carried the bitter taste of guilt. She realized that desire, unchecked and unacknowledged, had consequences, emotional consequences, moral consequences, consequences that would reach far beyond herself. The next day, Ethan seemed different, quieter, more introspective. He didn't confront her directly, but Olivia could sense the subtle shifts in his behavior. The way he avoided certain topics, the carefulness in his tone, the way his eyes lingered a little longer before looking away. She felt the invisible thread of suspicion tighten around her chest. Every interaction with him was layered with tension, each word measured, each glance weighted. And with every moment, Olivia felt the growing burden of her secret pressing against her heart that BY evening. The emotional tension had reached its peak. Olivia had promised herself she would resist, that she would not allow the allure of Logan to destabilize the life she had built. Yet when her phone buzzed again with Logan's message, "Can we meet? I feel like I need to see you," she felt her resolve crumble. She knew meeting him could escalate everything, that the consequences could be immediate and irreversible, but the pull was irresistible. The emotional intimacy she had found with Logan had created a hunger that she could no longer contain, a yearning that demanded acknowledgement. She walked to the cafe where they had met before, rain falling steadily around her. The city felt alive in a way it hadn't in months, each drop a reminder of the risks she was taking. When she saw Logan waiting by the door, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her, she felt both relief and fear. Relief for the comfort his presence offered, fear for the inevitable fallout of this choice. They spoke softly at first, words barely above a whisper, their conversation layered with unspoken meaning, each sentence carrying weight that neither dared to acknowledge outright. Logan reached out, his hand brushing hers once more, lingering slightly longer than socially necessary. Olivia felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of anticipation and guilt. She knew the boundaries were fragile, yet she allowed herself the brief comfort of the touch. For a moment, the world outside, the responsibilities, the marriage, the obligations, vanished. All that existed was the intensity of connection, the undeniable truth that she had allowed herself to be seen and to feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. Returning home that night, the weight of reality settled on Olivia's shoulders like stone. Ethan was asleep when she entered the apartment, his form curled under the blankets. The room silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Olivia stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching him breathe, feeling the ache of guilt cut through her chest. She had chosen a path of emotional betrayal, one that had begun with longing and attention, but was now perilously close to crossing into something more tangible. She realized that nothing would ever be the same. The life she had once considered secure and predictable was unraveling thread by thread. Logan had awakened a part of her that demanded recognition, yet the consequences of yielding to desire were undeniable. She understood, with painful clarity, that love and fidelity were not merely matters of presence, but of attention, empathy, and engagement. Ethan's absence in the emotional space they once shared had created the void that Logan had filled, and she was now painfully aware of the costs of neglect, of longing, of choices made in the heart rather than in the mind. Olivia sank onto the couch, wrapping herself in a blanket and staring at the rain-streaked windows. She allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, the weight of her choices pressing down on her, yet mingled with a strange awareness of vitality she hadn't felt in months. She knew the road ahead would demand confrontation, decisions, and perhaps heartbreak. But in that still, reflective silence, she also acknowledged the undeniable truth. She had awakened, and life, as she had known it, was irrevocably changed.